All right. Welcome everyone, and Shane will take over. Have a nice group today.
Sorry, I'm just connecting my headphones. I had some issues logging into my CCT computer because my password reached. But can you hear me now? Can anyone hear me?
Shane, we can hear you. You can.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So thanks for logging in. Apologies, I was a couple of minutes late. As I said, I had to reset my password, and because I'm not on campus, it messed everything up with logging in. But if you're comfortable, feel free to turn on your camera because I think it looks like it's an intimate group so far. So it might be a good chance just to see who else is out there. And who we're talking to. So I have had a look at the discussions this week, and it was really great to see people applying that template for their own examples. But I wonder if there's anyone here who has had a chance to do that as well, but may not have been able to post a comment yet. And we can just have a quick bit of a chat about that. So is there anyone you could put your hand up electronically if you have had a chance to look at the discussion this week? At some point, we will need to contribute because it can't just be me talking for an hour. No, well, that's okay. In that case, then, what it might be useful to do is just hear from each of you about your own practice and your own research and what you're doing at the moment and what you hope to get from this course, because I see some familiar names, but not all where we express this information in the first week. So it would be great if someone would like to go first. I'll give you a few seconds to pop your hand up. Otherwise, we'll have to go around the circle. But does anyone want to jump in and tell us who they are and what they're researching and where?
If you are not able to speak, but you can type, it's still fine as well. We can use the chat function.
Yeah, pop it in the chat and we can read it out for you.
Yeah.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. My name is Bimini. I'm based in James Cook University. I'm actually studying a PhD in epidemiology. So the focus is studying using mathematical models to understand disease transmission and predicting interventions in the coming future. It's more like a global kind of research that can look at predicting diseases and how we can mitigate that in the future. So that's basically what I'm doing. Any other thing I'm supposed to add again?
Yeah. No, that's great. That's really fascinating and important stuff that you're doing. It makes me consider though, because you say using mathematical models as a kind of core of your research. How do you see critical or creative thinking apply to that kind of research? Because from my complete lack of knowledge and understanding of that area, mathematical models are quite prescriptive, or am I wrong in that understanding?
So I didn't get you.
Oh, sorry?
No, I didn't get what you said. No.
Oh, right, sure. I was just wondering if you can explain to me where you see the role of critical and creative thinking in your research? Because I think you said mathematical models or mathematical modeling is the core of your research. And for someone who's from a complete opposite of the spectrum of research, how do you think critical and creative thinking can be applied? Because my understanding is mathematical models can be quite prescriptive.
Yeah, because it's critical thinking is very important because you need to understand the characteristics of different geographical area. You need to have a critical understanding, find some parameters. So mathematical modeling is relatively like you're using formulas to predict. So you can, in as much as you're doing it in an abstract way, you need to find the parameters, and also there need to be some indicators, right? For example, if there are like some vectors like mosquitoes coming up in that area and their incidence is, the population is growing a bit, then that's a factor. So you won't just go into like an area without thinking about if there are some risk factors to do a research. There have to be something to stimulate, and why there's a fear. For example, global warming now is an indication now. The temperature of all the world is increasing. So that's something. Will that increase disease? Because warm temperature might make some diseases. So that is something, it's a factor you think about before you start saying, okay, so I will not go to the poles where there's very cold, or Scandinavia very cold, and I'm like talking about effect of warm temperature. I can't, but I now know that in Europe the temperature is getting a bit warm, and I noticed that some mosquitoes, for example, are now easily, so these are the part of the things. So you need to critically assess, understand, and that's what you apply to make reasoning, because the decision you make will be used by public health officials, and they might put in millions and billions in it. So you need to be sure your recommendation why you are doing the research.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for doing that work too. That's really, really impressive. And the thing that I was really stuck on there was using the formulas for prediction. I think that's almost that's a mathematical way. It's almost like a mathematical expression of creative thinking. But of course, you're not making it up, but realizing potentials. Yeah, based on history, which is what creative thinking is, using your lived experience to imagine what might be next.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's great. Thank you.
All right, no worries.
Yeah, great. I would like to hear from everyone. And please jump back in again if just because you've had a chat, feel free to keep the discussion going. But the next on my screen is Fabrio. I wonder if you'd be comfortable in popping your mic on if you can, and giving us a little bit of a rundown of your research and where you are and how you see critical and creative thinking applied in that context.
Yep, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. So my work revolves around medical image processing. So it's very technical and scientific, computer science sort of background, combined with obviously medical sciences. And my work focuses on a prostate cancer treatment called image-guided radiation therapy. So the problem that I'm tackling is that this treatment uses ionizing radiation to kill cancer. And the problem is that we don't want to radiate the healthy cells. It makes sense because we want to get the side effects, and we just want to focus on the cancer. The issue is that if we think of lung cancer, and if we want to irradiate a specific location, obviously where the cancer is, we got to know where the cancer is moving, because in lung, you got breathing movement, for example. So my work aims in trying to predict where the cancer is going to move during a particular treatment session. And in doing so, we hope that having the ability to predict where the cancer is going to move means that we can preemptively tell the machine where to irradiate and to minimize that healthy cells irradiation. So I guess in terms of the critical thinking part, as I said, this work is mostly technical. And to begin, I guess, because I was using lung cancer as an example, but my work focuses more on the prostate cancer. So the motion around that area is more complicated, more subtle, because we got the rectum, we got the bladder, we also got muscle contraction. And even though if we're able to immobilize the patient around the hip area, all the organs surrounding the prostate will still be able to move. For example, the bladder is still filling up, even though, if you don't drink water, it still will fill up. So I guess to critically think about that is not easy, I think, to find the behavioral, the organs, how they behave and all that. So it's a bit challenging, I think, but my first step would be, like what everyone would do, is to do literature review and see what people have done and see if there are any, I guess, holes in that literature, and go from there. And that's, I guess, where the critical thinking part would be most applicable, just to see what people have done, what people have not done yet, or what could it be done better. I guess that's in short.
Yeah, great. So my understanding then is using that, the application of that kind of thinking to see what might have been missed, or how to do things differently to how other people have done it.
Yep. So it's very logical. I'm assuming there would be a bit of that creativity kicking in, but going back to the criteria of critical thinking, then the belief aspect would be quite non-existent, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's the goal, isn't it? To remove that kind of bias, I guess, and just have the actual factual consideration. Yeah, that's really great. Thank you, Fabio. Really, again, this is amazing stuff you're all doing. What institution are you at, Fabio, if you don't mind me asking?
James Cook Uni up in North Townsville, but
Great.
I'm also collaborating with CSIRO.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Wow. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, as I said, if anyone has a comment as we're moving through the discussions, or anyone else's explanations raises anything, feel free to jump in and we'll have a chat about it. So yeah, as I said, I did want to hear from everyone, so we'll just keep going around. I know a couple of people have just jumped in, so I'll try and re-explain what we're doing. But the next actually on my screen is Zana. And what I've asked is if people can just give us a rundown of their research, what they're doing, where they're doing it, and how critical and creative thinking can be applied in that context. So yes, Anna, if you're able to, you ready to go? Getting the headphones sorted.
Hi everyone, sorry for running late. I was in another session that went over time. Okay, so we're talking about our research in brief, and I am in the second year of a PhD study at QT, and with the faculty of the merged new faculty, like Creative Industries, Education, and Social Justice. And so my research focuses on the perspectives and experiences of citizenship education of culturally diverse and migrant youth. So that's in brief. And yeah, in some of the conversations that already happened in this course, I think I've been referring to it fair bit, to the notions of citizenship and global citizenship education, and how there is this quite consistent dominance of the Western perspectives in these forms of education. And in terms of how critical thinking can be applied to my research, is that, I mean, I'm doing it through a transformative paradigm, which really looks at, you know, challenging the status quo in the societies, and you know, working alongside marginalized communities, you know, considering your research participants as co-researchers, and coming from an angle of social justice. So I think in everything that I will be doing, critical thinking will be essential, but also creative thinking, because you know, I will be engaging meaningfully with the young people that I get to do research with or co-research with. And for that, I will really need to be responsive and open-minded and creative in the way that you know, the research is carried out in every stage. So I don't know if that makes sense, what I'm saying, but
yeah, absolutely. So I'm really interested in that method of participants as co-researchers. So I and applying critical thinking to that, I guess it's part of that listening or experiencing what they offer during those research processes and having that inform your own ideas or views, or how does that interaction play out?
I think, I mean, it will be, actually what's coming to my mind now is, so it's not only about you sort of approaching your research, applying critical thinking in one's research, but encouraging others to do so. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's right.
Efficiently? Yeah. So,
Mm.
but the elements in my research will be such that in some parts of data collection, the young people will be we will be analyzing data together, and they will be providing their recommendations for building you know, the models of citizenship education that are more socially just and culturally inclusive. But I don't know what that will look like yet until it happens, you know, which is a part of that co-researching. So it's just really, I guess, creating that space, facilitating that space for it to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. I'd really love to hear how that the results of that.
Yeah, me too.
I think often working with young people, that is when my kind of inherent beliefs are often brought to the fore, or the things I didn't know that I think I know are always kind of highlighted. So many different perspectives of looking at things and experiences that young people have that are often untainted, particularly by this world of academia. That in all this idea of critical thinking, but what are we even talking about this week? It's one particular way of thinking critically. So, you know, we're just trying to force everyone to think the same way. And is that actually critical thinking? You know, I've gone off on a tangent.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? It's actually, critical and creative thinking is one of the the competencies that are embedded in the Australian curriculum. I'm not sure if you're aware of
Oh,
that.
yeah. And I often consider how that is reconciled with things like, the national standards, NAPLAN, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So how does assessing students in a standardized way reconciled with also having the importance of critical and creative thinking? How do you standardize creative thinking as an example?
Yes.
I mean, as we go through the modules in this unit, there are particular ways and techniques that creative thinking can be encouraged. But, as individual learners, how is that possible? Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. That's great. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, no worries. It would be great to hear from others. I probably missed that part.
We did have some, I think the other two examples we've had already this morning are from not a very different, but it's certainly a very specific academic genealogy that's probably different to the faculty, which I'm in your faculty as well, the way we consider critical and creative thinking. So on that note, I wonder if Jackson, if you're able to jump in here and tell us a bit about your research and how you see critical thinking and creative thinking applied in that context. Give it a second.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Hi. Yeah. I'm working in chemical engineering, developing a recycling process for solar panels in my research.
Great.
So yeah, I guess I've got to creatively come up with ideas to implement, and then critically analyze what other people have done and how well I can integrate that into a newer, more efficient process.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I guess the kind of chemical engineering side of it, and actually how is that going to work, and how are you going to break down those components and turn them into something new? I guess is the critical or creative side of it coming into what those things will be, or is it the process coming up with a new process into how that is done?
Yeah, a little bit of both, really.
Well, it'll be a great problem once you solve it. I'm sure that's very can be commercialized. I'm hoping that your institution is probably hoping that. Anyway, where are you doing this research?
Yeah, so I'm based at the University of Newcastle, and I've got an industry partner I'm developing this with.
Oh, fantastic. So have you come from industry from that partner, or you found them as part of your research journey?
It was sort of together in a scholarship between the university and CSIRO and an industry partner.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations. That's great. Great work. Okay, and I think that leaves us with excuse my pronunciation, Sumudu. Are you able to give us a bit of a rundown on what you're doing?
Hi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a second year PhD from the QUT. So I'm doing my research at the Center for Genomics and Personalized Health. So what I do is I look at the genomic background of specific populations to see how they respond to clinically prescribed medications. So for that, I actually use, it's kind of a multidisciplinary platform where I have to use the computational technologies and the biological background to understand how the genetic, based on the population level, relates to the response changes in individuals. So I was actually curious about how to apply critical and creative thinking in my context. So basically, I think even without knowing that I'm using the concepts, I think I've already been using these the terms that we actually discussed in week 1 and 2.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's mostly understanding. I think the knowledge of the subject is playing kind of a main role, as we discussed in week 2. So it's basically to understand what people have done, and then reasoning and probably logically thinking what we can do to improve this, to find new ways. So yeah, that's kind of difficult, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really, all of this research is wonderful. I remember making me think about my when I was doing my PhD and how pedestrian that was compared to all of these fantastic topics. So again, I think it sounds to me that in your discipline, there is a very, kind of structured, strong tradition or lineage of the way that things are done. And so applying the critical thinking of that, maybe to understand at a deeper level how it could be done, or to think about how the results can be applied. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it's probably both. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everyone. That's really great. And we did that in exactly the right amount of time. So what I thought might be interesting for me anyway, even if it's not for you, but hopefully we get something out of this, is to just do a little bit of an exercise. And that is, now that we know a little bit about each of us and what we're doing and our research at the moment, but what I thought might be interesting is to just take a couple of minutes, or maybe I'll give us 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, just to think about our research and our research discipline, and to actually see if we can articulate what might be the limitations or the inherent biases in the way that we do our research. So an example for me is that I do ethnographic research based on lived experience. And as part of that, the researcher actually becomes a participant. And so one of the problems around that is the researcher bias and the limitations of my lived experience in contributing to that research, and how that may influence my participants in driving them towards an outcome, whether consciously or not, I'm already driving towards, or if it actually is coming together with those participants and finding a unique outcome to that situation. So I guess the inherent biases in that is the overhanded influence that the researcher has in that kind of research, and also dismissing more kind of factual scientific types of research as unable to see the nuances of the human lived experience. And so they're the things I have to be aware of when I'm researching. So in your discipline, in your research, what are the limitations of the lineage of the research that you've come from, or the inherent biases that you may be consciously or unconsciously applying in your research practices? And I guess what that's helping us to do is to critically think about what we do, and potentially what we might be able to borrow from other research disciplines in order to overcome some of those. I know that's kind of a bit convoluted and probably difficult to do in 3 minutes, but hopefully we've had a chance to work through some of the modules in the last 3 weeks, or maybe even skipped ahead into the creative thinking component. And ideally, overall, at this stage of our research journey as postgrad, have an understanding of, a lot of the limitations of our research fields are often written about by others anyway. So to actually know those and understand those, how they're influencing our practice. Any questions about that before I give us a few minutes to have a think and then come back and share? Construction
not-
outside of it. Yes,
I'm just wondering, so I'm not entirely clear what you would like us to do.
Sure. I would like you to note down the limitations of your research, the field that you're in. So in some fields that may be broader, and so you've chosen a particular methodology. In that case, what are the limitations of that methodology, or the biases inherent in that? So what biases are you inheriting from that field, or what are your own personal biases in that research?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Thanks.
I'll just mute myself. And that's good timing now the construction's kicked off, and turn my video off. Let's say 3 minutes and I'll come back and check in, and if people need a couple more, we will. Otherwise we'll share. Okay. Recording. Thanks, Paula. Okay, do people have something to share? If you do, raise your hand and the rest can keep going. Oh, fantastic. Yes, absolutely.
All right. I just want to talk about the limitation from my own research. Because one of the limitations from my research is can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the limitations is I talked about mathematical modeling. So ideally, in most scientific research, you want to work with subjects and collect data from the subjects directly. Maybe it's a lab, or you collect data sets sometimes from maybe publicly available data sets. But sometimes in mathematical modeling, you may use data sets. Sometimes you have to just use like set parameters based on what people have done before. So there's like a formula, then you get some parameters. So the challenge you have in some instances is your result from your research may not directly apply to the location in which you are doing the research. It's kind of a limitation. If you collect the data directly from that geographical location and make your inference with it, you can 100% make an inference on it. But now you are estimating, and sometimes you are using parameters based on research done in other close. So that's kind of limitation in that kind of research. And also sometimes it's difficult for people to infer. You need to have a sense of understanding to be able to understand the research. So it's not like when you publish, it's quite technical knowledge to understand the outcomes. One of the biases, like I said, you as a researcher, you have to choose some of the parameters based on work done somewhere else. And sometimes you might choose some of the parameters that suit your condition that may not actually suit what you're working with, or it may affect because different researchers do their research, and we have different parameters, so that might be biased. Or sometimes we use mathematical models of different researchers as what we can use, because outside it suits our story, right? So the bias there is you want to choose a model that's going to that may not solve it. But the one that is quite complicated and complex, you will not, like, or you will not have some understanding so much on that. So your outcome may not be so good because that choose the others, So that's another bias. So most of the time people don't know all the models and influence, no matter how complex it is. And at the end of the day, you're getting similar results because they're not getting any new things out because that's the bias. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very keen insight. And that idea of, I think, spans across all research is, that in one way we're building on the work of others, but in another way we're borrowing from the work of others, and whatever bias is built into that, we're just replicating that each time.
Yeah.
Which is I think something probably to be aware of, that that's how academia works. So how do we decolonize academia and find a new way to do it? I'm not sure. One of the things I was thinking about in the first part of your response, and we were talking about the downfalls, I guess, is there must actually be benefits to that as well. So some of the pitfalls of that, but there must be a reason that you're doing it this way, or other researchers in your field are doing it this way. So what are the benefits of that I don't know if they outweigh that, or
Is you can make a difference. Follow the methodology. You can tell. You can say that different set parameters. Those parameters are parameters of people that have done the research in a lab, in a controlled environment, right? So we are not using an abstract parameters. You are using, like, for example, I might say, let's estimate the mosquito population in Townsville, for example, and maybe work done in Cairns. We usually start with, the population starts at 100, right? So Townsville, may not share similar characteristics. So using that parameter may not be so biased, although we know that there might be difference in temperature or climate, but we need to make that projection, and you need to use parameters from work done elsewhere, and the projection can be used as a guide. In making those projections, you will do plus or minus. For example, you can say this is 80%, but it might be 100, or it might be 60, for example. So you also give, although there's limitation, but you also give chance for plus or minus using the outcome of that. So the good outweigh the bad enough, even with the limitations.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing it. That's very keen insights into your field, which is fantastic. Is there someone who'd like to jump in now, or should we just go back around again? Pop your hand up if you want to have a go.
I can have a go.
Yeah, great, Fabio. Thank you.
I think echoing to, I'm sorry if I butcher the pronunciation of the name, the previous speaker. I think because again my field is also revolves around science and a bit of modeling as well, and since I work around medical imaging and I use MR images as my data set. The biggest problem, or the biases, or the limitations, I guess, with my research is acquiring good data, acquiring good images that can be used to train the model. As the saying goes in computer science, or like in the world of artificial intelligence, garbage in, garbage out. So if you train a model with a bunch of noise, just unreliable data set, then you will not be able to perform good predictions with that model. You expect to get garbage out, essentially. And that's the biggest problem with the world of AI, where, especially in my field, where it's quite difficult to get data set. then that is a big problem. I think the other one, I guess, bias is or other limitation. I think this is coming from a personal experience. Say if you've done your literature review and say one paper, say that technique A is really good, and since I just started doing this problem and I'm fairly new to the world of medical imaging, it's very difficult to have that, I guess, critical mindset when you're very new to this world and they say, hey, this technique's good. And, obviously when you have that critical thinking, then you'll try and think, what's the pros and cons of this particular technique? Why is it good? Why is it bad? But coming from someone who's very new to the field, then you are overwhelmed with this information, and it's very difficult for you to make that judgment. So I think that's, not sure if that's just me, but I feel like that's a big thing, I think, in the world of academia, especially for newcomers like myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea of, and that word judgment is really, really good one too, because you have to decide, don't you, what the data is, or what you're going to use, or what you're going to do, and how do you make that judgment? I guess what I'm hearing is if there is a deficiency in experience or understanding, is to adequately make that judgment. But then I suppose the other side of it is an overwhelming amount of experience may force you to overlook something and maybe rush too quickly to making a judgment.
Yeah, so I guess what's the best way to avoid that pitfall besides just having experience and learn from your mistakes?
That's right. Learn from your mistakes, I think, is right. And also, I guess you be willing to make mistakes and then actually publish them. Publish them as a mistake. This is what we did and it was a mistake. Which can be just as useful. Yeah, no, thank you for that insight. That was really something we all should be thinking about. And I guess the point is always having not that critical voice, because I think a lot of us in this field always have a critical voice going. Sometimes we need to let that go. But actually, the notion of critical thinking just in the back of the mind, applying to every stage of the kind of research journey. And how can it be used, critical thinking, as a positive, as a useful thing, not being critical, but actually critically thinking about what you're doing, not just in the final stages when you're analyzing the data, but even in the planning and the doing as well. Cool, thank you. We probably got, I just keep talking and time gets away, but I think we've got time, hopefully for 2 more, but at least 1 more. So Jackson or Anna, who's going to jump in first?
I don't mind, but I don't
Thanks,
really
Anna.
have something. I don't have anything comprehensive. Well, it's just so interesting to hear from others, really, such different fields and ways of thinking. It's fascinating to me. So my research is qualitative, and it will be, I will be running interviews and focus groups with participants who identify as being from culturally diverse and migrant backgrounds. And I, as a researcher, also am from culturally diverse and migrant backgrounds, and I'm aware that I bring my own bias and my own experiences of migration and being a person from a culturally diverse background living in Australia. So in the same way, my 25 interview participants and 16 focus group participants, which is at the moment the design of the study, will bring their own biases to the research. And I think it is something that it will be very interesting to engage with. And particularly when it comes to focus groups, where the research participants who will likely not, have not met each other prior to taking part in the research, will together reflect on their experiences of migration and being a young person living in Australia, and also not only of migration, but being a citizen in different contexts. Together trying to co-construct a model of education that will be more inclusive. So yeah, I have not much to say as of now, but except for that, I will really come to it with an open mind, and I really need to be continuously reflective and aware of these complexities. But I think that in itself is an idea of bringing multiple perspectives together and seeing what happens, And in terms of the limitations, the methodology is such, there will be a number of participants included, but that by no means will be representative of all of the many, many different cultures and experiences that are present in our society. So yeah, these are just some of the thoughts that came to mind in those 3 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and they're great thoughts. And one of the things that is kind of standing out for me in this discussion in general today is the different, I guess, levels of attention, maybe in importance even, placed within different disciplines on what might be seen as insufficiencies or biases. So we just heard just before from February talking about the quality of the data and making sure that what you get is of a certain kind of standard affecting the outcome. Compared to something like what I think you're talking about, Anna, and that is the different qualities of data and the the different perspectives and influences that each individual is bringing to the project. And I think in some disciplines that is embraced, and simply you kind of lean into it, I guess, to use contemporary parlance, and acknowledging that and putting it up front and saying these are all of the deficiencies and the biases, but we know they're there, but hey, we're going to do this anyway, and we're going to embrace those, as opposed to other disciplines that try and remove all deviating external influencing factors and just have a vacuum of research. And I do wonder what both of those schools of thought might be able to lend each other as we're moving further into these creative thinking ideas around creative thinking in the module. How do we challenge our thinking? How do we encourage creativity? And I think one way that we can potentially do that is by looking at how other disciplines do things differently. And maybe can we embrace some of that dirty data in our discipline as a way to encourage a new way of thinking about what we do? And for those of us who are already embrace kind of diversity of data, if I can put it that way, how can we be a bit more strategic in the way that we focus in on different components of that data to tidy it up? And what might that actually, bring out new data for us? Anyway, it's all about thoughts and ideas and all of that, really, isn't it? But I think we're almost out of time. So this is probably a good opportunity to throw it back to you and say, as we're working through this content, or worked through, or getting to this content, and you've got me here and Ola as well. Is there anything, any questions you have for us? Anything you can throw at us that we might be able to answer here and now while we have the opportunity before we go back into the online virtual ether you know, world. Anything?
No, I think I'm good there. Thanks so much, Shane and Ola.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thanks for your contributions today as well.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Also, thank you for facilitating this. I can't think of any. I'm sure that 10 questions will come to mind after this, but right now, yeah, with such a limited time, I can't unless if you have any reflections for us, or any tips from your points of view, from your areas of research and
sure.
so.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and you don't have to have it. And if there are any questions, then send them through, though you will get my out of office. But I have set up a rule that if anything comes with this kind of eGrad stuff attached to it, it'll get forwarded to me. But my only thing is that I've actually been really inspired by the discussions that are going on the Canvas site and the interactions between you guys. It's been really great to see people thinking deeply, because we get so caught up in our particular research topic, particular research problem, that sometimes it's useful just to take a step back and either look at our field more broadly, or the reasons why we're doing things, or just to see other people's ideas about ideas. So I think even if you don't have the chance to contribute, I think it's useful just to look at other people's comments on there and help contextualize the material that we're looking at as well. That's the only thing I would say for now. And thank you for your contributions today and in the discussion forums, because there's been really good engagement with the material this year, which has been nice to see. But yeah, if that's it, I think maybe we're almost at time now anyway. I think, aren't we? Oh, yeah, 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I look
See you
forward to
online.
reading discussions next weekend. Thanks, Anna.
Will do.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
You too.
You.